Nurses of psych wards, what did a patient do that left you speechless? Probably the saddest was a resident I had a long time ago. This gentleman was a WW2 vet with Alzheimer's and dementia. Probably once or twice a month he would relive some battle he was in. He would literally run up the hallway and grab you and yell at you to get down behind the sandbags. He would then tell you take his Thompson. Because it was too heavy for him, he would just use his pistol. Then he would get up and run back down the hallway. This guy was old, and seeing him run full sprint like that up and down the hallway during one of his episodes was surreal. I can't imagine having to constantly relive the worst moments of your life where you witnessed and survived the unspeakable horrors of war. We had a Gero psych floor. Crazy old people. One night while passing through, a little old lady popped her head out her doorway and said to me, "I could sure use the company of a good looking young man tonight." Sorry, I'm not that good looking. Quick as snot on a doorknob she said, "That's okay, I can't see too well." I didn't join her, but her charisma was on point. Not a nurse, pharmacist. Had one of our clozapine patients miss a monthly meeting to discuss their medication. Called around, found out she was in the ICU having eaten 2 of her own fingers, then visited her mother for coffee, still bleeding. Had a friend tell me of another patient, made a cut in his thigh and reopened it regularly until the whole thing was a scar tissue cavern, by some miracle avoiding infection. Started using his meat pocket to hold pens and coins and anything he could collect in his ward. Nobody knew until a paperclip pierced the side and he finally wound up with an infection that took him to ICU where they found his stash. My sister was actually sectioned earlier this year for her eating disorder. She shouldn't have been, but that's a story for another time. And she was right next to the PICU, psychiatric intensive care unit. One of the nights she heard multiple screams coming specifically from that ward. One of the patients had bit a chunk out of a nurse's leg as they were trying to detain them. They then started eating said chunk. It's crazy to think these types of things happen. Not a nurse, but I was a patient in a psych ward. The ward was sectioned into 2 sides, based on case severity. I was on the less severe side. One night, an incredibly tall, somewhat muscular man escaped his room on the severe side, got through a door that was supposed to be locked, got into the less severe side, and into my room. I woke up, sat up, and saw him standing in my doorway. He asked in a shaky voice if I was alright. I hesitantly said yes, to which he responded by getting a look of terrified horror and screamed, "I knew it. You can see them too. Don't let them get you," before he was dragged away screaming by security. I visited a prison for a warden job and went to see the constant surveillance guys for their own safety etc. There was a fella there who had used a razor to slice his stomach open and started pulling chunks of himself out for fun. He also started using the hole, which wouldn't heal, as a hiding place. A towel was found stuffed in there which his body had started fusing to. Apparently he was quite nice, but the whole thing wasn't for me, and I didn't go ahead with applying. Was interviewing a guy in psych ward, and he was complaining about how he couldn't have any whiteout, a liquid eraser for typewriters because he was on suicide watch. Claimed it was stupid because if he wanted to kill himself, as he pointed out, he could use the drawstring from the blinds to hang himself, or he could use his pencil to stab himself, or use a typewriter metal bar to off himself. I agreed it was silly to hold back the small bottle of liquid whiteout. When I relayed the convo to my instructor about how silly it seemed due to him having several other ways, she replied that he proved to me that he had been considering ways to kill himself, and that's why he was able to come up with so many so quickly. He never did get his whiteout. 60-something old woman would come out of her room every so often at night topless and holding out her saggy breasts, saying in broken English, "My nipples, neeples, my nipples please, for the children." 40-something woman would sneak the shower mat out of the bathroom to put under her bed because she was God and we were stealing her power by electrocuting her vagina every night. The floor mat apparently stopped this from happening. A severely schizophrenic woman used to tell me that my name was the worst fairy tale lie that she ever wrote in the 2 Bibles for her daddy. When she was angry with me, she would yell at me and say, "Get out of here, fairy tale book. I wish I never wrote you." That same woman attacked some nursing students who were attempting to use tissues over lollipops to make ghost props for Halloween. She didn't seem to like this, and while trying to hit them was yelling, "You idiots, you can't make ghosts out of lollipops." Again, same woman but different group of nursing students brought in several pizzas for an end of semester party. The woman then walked up and down the tables looking at the pizzas. Then out of nowhere she started throwing the pizza and yelling, "What's this supposed to be? Some kind of pizza test?" I'm not a nurse, but was a patient once. Giant dude got upset one dude changed the channel from a football game he was watching and smashed his skull with his fists. Not fully, but enough that when they brought him back a few days later he started seizing and had to be removed again. Didn't see him again. Also, there was one lady who was straight out of the movies, walking around preaching the end of days loudly and sweating like crazy. I'm a tech at a psych hospital, but I start nursing school in August, so I hope this counts. We had a very tall, heavyset man who swung at a nurse and a fellow tech when they asked him to not stand naked in the door and flash the whole unit, so we put him in a hold and escorted him to the seclusion room. From there he tried to strangle himself with his underwear. He had them on his head like a bandana, so we opened the door and took those away. Then he peed all over the floor, did push-ups, and every time he came down he would slurp it up. Eventually he got bored of that and began writing on the wall in his pee, and then masturbated onto the door and said it would be better if he could fuck my dead corpse. Eventually his MB52 kicked in and he contacted for safety/good behavior, so we opened the door again and he bit me on the hand and drew blood. From there I got permission to not be involved in the code and a peer swapped me out. I'm assaulted on a weekly basis and we aren't even an acute care facility. I'm very excited to go PRN in August. $15.38/HR is not worth it. Not me, but my dad used to work in Arrowdale and J Ward, Australian insane asylum and prison for the criminally insane, respectively, in the 70s. He used to talk about sunny days in J Ward where they'd bring out all the inmates during a sunny day and they'd promptly line up and start jacking off. In Arrowdale they'd deal with the jacking off problem by strapping you into cotton mittens, but a lot of the inmates would chew a hole through them just to get a finger out to jack off with. His worst story was about a psychotic woman in Arrowdale. She had self-inflicted scars all over her face from scratching herself, self-imposed bite marks all over her body from trying to eat herself, and she had the nasty habit of chewing the inside of her mouth and spitting blood at your eyes and mouth hoping you'd catch one of the myriad of diseases she carried. Got assigned to child psych ward in a hospital where I worked. Easy gig, wear street clothes, not much to do, but pass out meds and observe 15-year-old black kid, overweight, is sitting beside me casually discussing his day when he jumps up, begins screaming like a banshee, flailing around, looks like a seizure on roids, and I'm befuddled as to how to control him or the situation when after a few minutes of twisting my nerves into a tight ball, he stops, sits back down, and begins talking casually again. Had one of his spells. Not sure if anyone has ever been that close to a raving maniac while he's having a fit, but it's disarming to say the least. I'm an RN in Boston in a psych hospital and I've seen some shit. One of the things I'll never ever forget was we had this manic guy THST had been transferred from another unit cause he kept getting in fights over there and all the other patients were trying to attack him. I was still working nights back then, and at about 3 AM he came up to me and said his tooth hurt and he needed to see a dentist right away. I said I don't have a dentist for him to see, but when the doctor comes in the morning we can take a look. Gave him some Tylenol and sent him back to bed. About 5 minutes later he came out saying it really hurt and he needed to see a dentist to pull his tooth. Again I told him there's no dentist, but maybe I can get some more pain meds. In the middle of me explaining this to him, he sticks his hand in his mouth and rips his molar out of his head and handed it to me. Blood starts pouring out of his mouth, but he did even to seem to notice. After I clean him up and get the bleeding to stop and call the doctor to get him some Ativan, he goes, "Make sure you give me that tooth back when I leave. That's my tooth, don't try and steal it." Fucking wild shit.